Hello and welcome to our video series Leadership Talks. In this series, we will be talking to different leaders from various walks of life. We will try to know them beyond their designations, and we will also get to learn from their inspirational journeys. So keep watching. Pioneer of the Indian ID industry, a co-founder of HCL and TechSpan, ex-chairman of Headstrong. Today we will be talking to Mr. Arjun Malhotra. Hello Arjun sir, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
So welcome to our video series Leadership Talks, and you had an admirable and aspirational entrepreneur life. You are also an active supporter of several premium educational institutes and co-chair of the Global Pan IIT Alumni Association and on the board of governors of Doon School. So this just so much, when we talk about Mr. Arjun Malhotra, there's so much that one can talk about. But today we will start with, your childhood. So before we basically talk about your rich and long career, we would like to know more about you beyond those designations. We would like to know about your childhood, about Calcutta, about Delhi, about your family and how they all helped you with this journey of yours, and any particular childhood memory that you still remember or is sort of fond to your heart of that particular period.
Yes, so I was born in Calcutta. I always, the way I put it is in the first half of the last century. So I was actually born in 1949, but my birthday is in 5 days. So
wow.
I'll be 74 on this birthday. But
so you're January born?
Yes, a Capricornian, as my wife puts it, true Capricornian. But in those days, my mother was a doctor, my dad was in the army, and in those days, kids were born at home. And so I was born at my Nanka's place, my maternal grandparents' place.
Right.
And my maternal grandfather was a fairly well-known scientist. He was the president of the Indian Science Congress in 1954. Was probably India's best-known ecologist and fish expert. He was a zoologist. He was at that time head of the he was director of the Indian Museum in Calcutta. And technically I was born in the museum. Because he had a house inside the museum. It was Warren Hastings Court that was converted to the museum, and the residence was inside. So in fact, both my parents were working, and so I spent a lot of time growing up with my grandparents. In fact, my grandfather used to go walking with his scientist friends around Victoria Memorial, which is right next to me. And I'd be holding his finger and he'd be asking me 2 plus 3, 4 plus 5. And so I learned my mental math before I got to school. And I was what I would consider disruptive influence in the math class. Was when the teacher would write on the blackboard and draw those 2 lines, I would give her the answer. So I got thrown out of math class in Loreto Convent where I started. And I was sent for Bible knowledge.
Wow.
Yeah,
so fortunate to have your grandparents around you.
Yeah, so basically, how do I put it? My comfort with math is basically from there. I've always felt that when I go into an exam, I assume I have a right to get 100% math exam.
Right.
So I found that attitude always helped me, which is one reason why I took engineering. Calcutta for 7 years. And then my dad, he left the army and he was working with Dunlops. He got posted to Delhi. And so we all moved to Delhi. And I went to Columbus here, St. Columbus for 4 years. Then in the early 60s, 61, 62, my dad got recalled to the army because of the Chinese aggression in 62. So he got posted to the front. And my mother got a Ford Foundation fellowship to go to the Harvard School of Public Health. So she went up there. So both the kids had to go to boarding. So I ended up at the Doon School in Dehradun, and my sister went to Tara Hall in Simla. She was 3 years younger. When my mother came back a year or so later, they couldn't afford 2 kids in boarding. So because I was close to my senior Cambridge, they left me in boarding, and my sister got pulled to a day school, a modern day in Delhi, modern day convent. Yeah, that's so. And from IIT, then actually, when my mother came back, she'd got a Grundig TK20 spool tape recorder. You know, they weren't very easily available in those days. You had to be traveling abroad and get it back and all that. It was my dad used to use it quite a lot. One summer holiday, I decided that I would open it up and see what's inside and then put it back, which I did diligently, but it didn't work after I put it back. And I got into a lot of trouble for that. And I told myself at that time that one day I will become an electronics engineer who will be able to do this. That's really what motivated me to do engineering, number one. Number two, to do electronics. And number three, in those days, if you knew people, you could get into college. In fact, I had admission to Stephens because I played cricket for Doon, and that gave you an automatic admission. The fact that I got a first division in senior Cambridge was a real plus. But I wanted to do electronics, and all the 5 IITs at that time had a department of electrical engineering. Kharagpur had a separate department of electronics and electrical communication engineering. So I chose that. I went to IIT Kharagpur, spent 5 years there. And then, like most kids with me, everyone was trying to go abroad, or most people, I should say. And I had also applied, and my plan was, and I thought I had everything clear in my head. I thought I didn't take computers as an option. I took control systems, and I was going to work for NASA after doing my PhD in satellite control. Life never works out the way you think it's going to work out. So I had admission at Stanford and Berkeley, so I had to choose one of them.
Wow.
It's just that I had decided to get married to the girl. I mean, I'd decided who, and she basically felt that if I did my PhD and stuff, it'd take me 7 years before and she didn't know if her parents would let her wait for 7 years.
Right.
So I always think of that's how I became an entrepreneur. I took the biggest decision, probably the best decision for me.
Absolutely.
And I talked to my to-be father-in-law, and he said there's no way he's going to get his daughter married to someone who didn't have a confirmed job.
Right.
So I got a job with DCM as a senior management trainee. Stayed here for a year. Got confirmed. Got married 14 days after I got my confirmation. But then DCM, and I was going to Stanford. They kept my admission open. Said you'll have to reapply for Yale. And my GRE scores were pretty good, so I wasn't too worried. But DCM decided to get into electronics. And I was one of the few electronics engineers there. So, and I got national responsibility 1 year out of college.
Oh my God.
Because of that. And so I thought, hey, where am I going to get this opportunity? So let me stay on for a year. And I kept my admission open at Stanford for 5 years. Okay. Then they said, you got to do your GRE again. And I didn't think I'd moved away from engineering for so many years. So I decided that wasn't it. But, that was the way it was. 5 years in DCM. And and really, family is the usual Punjabi, North Indian family. My grandmother's family was from Gujranwala in Punjab. My grandfather's family was from Lahore, but they had settled in Calcutta in the early 1900s. My dad's family came from Burma. They were settled in Burma. They came across during the war. My mother, of course, was in Calcutta. She graduated from Calcutta Medical College.
Right. So there were Punjabis in the house, but from different directions.
Yes. And so, I was talking to my dad once, and I was saying, while you settled in Burma, where are we originally from? And technically, we are Pathans. We came from Peshawar. So, and I had no idea until he told me, but which is why, wherever I work, first thing I check is on our receivables. And you can check that with magic too. That's how he's been.
So talking about, going back to your childhood and talking about you as a kid, how were you as a kid? Like, were you mischievous? Were you a studious kind? What sort of, personality traits were within you as a kid?
So I guess I was, how do I put it? I had my share of scrapes. I had my share of broken limbs and stitches and stuff like that.
Wow.
I guess my parents tell me I was stubborn. My wife tells me I'm stubborn, but I think I'm pretty flexible.
It's strong.
Yeah, I guess that would be the right word. But yeah, I'm, growing up in Museum House, where my grandfather was the director, were really, I was like a little king, if I use that term. There are 150 darwans there. I could roam around.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I could roam around the whole place. I've got them to open up their Dhaka Malmal and show me how it can be pulled through a ring. That kind of stuff. So, the museum has a lot of stuff in storage. They display only a small percentage of what they have. So, I learned a lot because in a museum you get a lot of history. There, mummies, there are all sorts of things. And the Indian Museum in Calcutta is quite something even now. And so that's really, I guess no one had to ever tell me to study. I think my logic was I'd come back from school, do my homework, and then fool around and play.
So you were not really the studious one, but you were the sharp one.
But I don't know if I can say that. But part of the thing was my mother came from a family that was very academic. And my dad came from a very all army, but he played soccer or football, as we call it, for Burma when he was a teenager. And he played football, first division, Calcutta too. So I was actually pulled into a number of sports quite early. So I tried to live a more, how do I put it, all-round kind of life. I definitely played games, and I tried to keep myself...
mix of good genes, I would say.
Well, I don't know, but it sort of helped me because it helped me keep my head clear. When you play sports, you learn how to lose gracefully.
Correct.
Right? And I think that's an important thing.
Right. So you were talking about maths as in one of your favorite subjects and a subject where you always used to excel. But were there any other subjects and topics which sort of, drew your interest at that time? Of course, you've talked about the electronics engineering, but were there any other subjects or maybe topics that, you wanted to know more about or sort of, drew your interest?
Yeah, basically physics and chemistry. I was always definitely not biology or art. I was always interested in those subjects.
Okay.
And what happened with me at Doon once, Doon has a system where you have what we call toy time, which is your study time. It's 45 minutes. Yeah. Toys are our desks on which we study, TOYE. And you have 45 minutes before dinner and 45 minutes after dinner. And every day you have Monday is chemistry and Hindi, Tuesday is, So your chemistry teacher, if he gives you homework on Tuesday, he can't expect it back before next Tuesday because you only get those 45 minutes on Monday. The only thing you have to do at your own time on Sunday is write the English essay, a weekly essay that you had to. Nice. So I remember once at a chemistry test, the teacher said, here's the test, and I hadn't prepared for it. I didn't know about it. So I tried to object, but no one else in the class objected. And so we ended up doing the test. People wrote 12, 15 pages. I wrote just 2-3 pages that I knew, whatever I remembered. And I gave the paper in. So when the answer papers were distributed, everyone's paper was given back except mine. And I thought, I probably failed. I'll get detention. I'll have to sit down on Saturday in the library and do this. And at the end of the class, 5 minutes before the class ended, he took out my paper and he told everyone, this is how you answer a chemistry paper.
Oh my God.
To the point, it's got everything, And he said, from now on, I'm not going to teach this class chemistry. If you have a problem, you ask him first. Only if he doesn't know, then you come to me. So I was ending up reading 2 chapters ahead on chemistry, trying to make sure that if anyone asked me a question, I would be able to answer it. In fact, we didn't have girls in school, but teachers' daughters could attend class. And our chemistry teacher's daughter was in our class. And she tells me that she asked her dad for some clarification at home, and he told her that you better check with him in class before you talk to me. So chemistry became a subject that I was very keen on, which is why I mentioned if I'd gone to Stephens, I would have done chemistry honors.
So after your engineering, you said you joined DCM, and you just talked about how it all happened, because that was not really the plan that you had. But then you formed a company, a startup in 1970s. Wasn't that unusual at that time, especially with so many restrictions from, the government side? How did it all start? People talk about startup culture today, but I think you started in 1970s.
Yeah, 75 actually. October 15th, October 1975. But yes, we were in DCM, we were doing really well. It was DCM 250 crore turnover at that time. That's their revenue. Our revenue in DCM data products, the electronics unit, was 1.72 crores, if I remember right, but very profitable. We made 72 lakhs of profit in that 1 point. And so what we'd done was to get out of competing, because our overheads were higher. So to get out of competing with mom and pop shops that were assembling calculators, we had a strong R&D. So we added features to the calculators that were user specific and were able to charge a premium. For example, for statisticians, we had mean, regression, etc., that were single key operations. Now, what happened was with that R&D, then we moved into programmable calculators, and we finally moved into computers as microprocessors and all were coming out. But because of India was a socialist country, and because of the Monopolies and Restricted Trade Practices Act, large private companies were not allowed to get into new areas.
Right.
While we did argue internally in DCM that programmable calculators, computers, there's no difference, you're writing a program, their internal advice was not to get into it because it would threaten their other business. Microprocessors were just coming out, and IBM and ICL, who were the dominant players at that time, ECIL, they were selling really old technology computers. So a number of us, in fact 6 of us who worked in DCM data products, decided that microprocessors were going to change the world. That was our conviction. And said, why don't we get out and make our own computers? At that time, you've got to remember, no business plan, no money. We just had just this passion that this was a new technology. It was going to change the world. So when we came out, we realized we needed money. And so we traded in calculators with Televista as the brand. They gave us 90 days credit. So that solved our cash problem. In 3 months, we figured we had made enough money to start developing our own computer. So we recruited a couple of people in R&D, Raman, the late S. Raman, and Mahendra Pratap, and they joined with equity. And basically by March, I was in Calcutta with Pami Puri, and I relocated back to Delhi. And Ajay Chaudhary, who was in Bombay, relocated to Madras. And now we covered all 4 regions, and Shivnadar and I, we focused on the computer business, realized that licenses had been restricted for state and public sector. So we signed a joint sector with UP Electronics.
Which was the government?
Which was in Lucknow, it was Uptron. Everyone knows it as Uptron. We were the first company that Uptron had set up, so to say. And that's how we got the name we chose. It's Hindustan Computers Limited. Every other company was Uptron something or the other. So that's how it started. Basically, just conviction that microprocessors were going to change the world, and the fact that we felt we knew the market. I think those were the 2 things that, and in my case specifically, look, my parents were earning, my wife was working. So other than affecting your lifestyle to some extent, one didn't feel the financial pinch.
Right.
I already
Because
had
of the financial pressure, so to say.
I already had a daughter by then, and my logic was, if it doesn't work out a year or two later, I can always go back to the workforce.
Right.
I'll have some mud on my face, but other than that, I mean, it shouldn't be any different. So that was really my motivation.
And
so we started we started in my grandmother's Barsati.
Oh yeah,
that's how the company started, and then we, a year and a half or so, 2 years later, we moved out to our own office.
Okay.
At that time, she was doing quite well in the company.
Right. So how was the reaction? I mean, that time people were probably not, used to this startup thing. So how was the reaction of your, people at home, your friends, or maybe, the market at large? What sort of reactions you got?
Yeah. So very good question. My parents were, let me put it neutral, if I use that term. I needed to borrow money to put in my equity.
Right.
My mother said, I'll give you everything in my current bank account, but I'm not going to touch my provident fund. So I ended up borrowing money from a friend and a batchmate from IIT Kharagpur, a Marwari friend, to put in part of my equity. But yeah, the family thought I was crazy. They thought I had a good job in a well-known company,
right,
a stable job, and no one in the family had ever done business earlier. So my uncles and aunts were, they had a view. My logic was, they asked me, why are you doing this? I said, microprocessor is going to change the world. Everyone thought I was high on pot or something. And but the funny thing was, 2 years later, when the company started doing okay, all of them took credit for it. But we always knew you would be able to do it.
That you will do.
That's what families are like,
Right.
So it's no different. Yeah, but that's really what we did. Initially, when we started, there were 6 of us. So 2 people stayed in Delhi, 2 went to Calcutta, and 2 went to Bombay.
Okay.
Because we felt that if things don't go well, you'll feel depressed. You need someone to cheer you up.
Right.
But as I said, 3 months later, things were looking okay. So I came back to Delhi. I went to Calcutta in October or so. I came back to Delhi in March 76. And Ajay, who was in Bombay, went to Madras. And that's how.
Okay. So I was reading somewhere, and it's very interesting that when Steve Jobs released Apple I, you guys also released your first computer, which was like a computer in India the same year and the same month. Is that true?
That is true. We had no idea at that time. We found out later. It was, we had an amazing R&D. That was just one thing. I also wanted to mention that we had a relational database a year or 2 before Oracle had one. And not only did we have a relational database, it was called Cirrus, Concurrent Information Retrieval and Update System.
Okay.
We had it networked on our product, which is called Magnum, the hardware. So we had a network relational database much before anyone else
had it. Wow. So you were, you and your team was like a pioneer in a lot of ways, so to say. And of course, the first made in India computer, made in India machine that you guys launched.
Yes. Well, technically no, because ECIL used to make computers in India also. But, it was the first microprocessor-based machine that got launched.
Right.
We also got pioneer status in Singapore. We were really the first computer company to make computers in Singapore.
Oh.
So we actually, I think we were crazy. We were a 3 crore company when we decided that we wanted to be a small fish in a big pond instead of a big fish in a small pond.
Okay.
And so we opened Singapore, which was what we could afford, as our window to the world.
Wow.
And so it's...
I think, it's all those people who think they're crazy are the ones who are holding the fort in the world. Otherwise, we would all have been living in a small pond.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true.
Right. So, talking about HCL, so you had set up, the HCL famed CAD and CAM division, and then the tie-up with Apollo Computers, and later with HP, and then, there was some performance which failed in HCL. So, said that, you are a person who is sort of capable of turning around dead projects. Is that true? And how do you see yourself? I mean, if people say that Arjun Malhotra is somebody who's capable of turning around the dead projects and making them profitable, so do you agree with that statement? And if yes, so is it that something which gives you some sort of new zeal, energy, or I mean, how do you do it and why do you do it is probably the...
So it's not that, it's a good question. It's not that Arjun Malhotra turns around dead projects. It's people, if they are motivated, they turn it around. You have to, an individual can't do it by himself or herself.
Sure, but the leadership really makes a lot of difference, sir.
Yes, you've got to get people motivated to and put them behind a common goal. And once they all see it and agree, you find that things will turn around. And really, I look back and, give you a little story then. So 10 years into HCL, the company had become quite large. How to put it, I started getting bored with whatever I was doing. And so I thought maybe I've done enough now. Let me go back to academics, go get my PhD and get back to teaching or research or something.
Right.
So I initially talked to my partners and said, by that time, I had a little cottage in Missouri because my son was at Lund. And I said, I'll go up there and live there for 3 months or so and sort out my head. And everyone told me, and rightly so, that look, you'll be as confused at the end of 3 months as you are now. So why don't you go do a management course or something where you learn something and you'll also get time to think. Right. So I then went in 1985, I went to the Harvard Business School to do the advanced management program. And that was a learning because I learned a lot from the other people at the program. And I basically realized that what I was missing was the fun of a startup. So when I came back, I told them I don't want my earlier responsibility back. I'll do something new. So we coined a word there called intrapreneur. So the way it worked was I said I'd start the CAD/CAM division, and I gave a business plan which required 25 lakhs of equity, so to say. And so I was given a 25 lakh drawdown from central accounts to be able to get that done. And that's really how we started the CAD/CAM division.
Okay.
And we got into a lot of things. Because we were not getting clearances from the US, we ended up selling instead of asking corporate for more money, which we could have, we ended up selling AutoCAD as a software to make money so that we didn't have to go to corporate and, as the late Amit Datta Gupta said, you can't go back and ask for money. So what I was told at that time, and rightly so again, was that, look, you can't only have fun. If any of our divisions gets into trouble, then you've got to handle it. And so the reprographics division ran into a problem. And it took a few months to sort of turn it around, but it did turn around and did quite well for a while. And then the US, HCL America had an issue. And so I was sent to the US to try and manage that whole issue. And I think we did a great job because it's now known as HCL Technologies, which is the main HCL company at this time. But yeah, and it's people. I mean, I still have, when I left for the US, my regional manager at Reprographics in Delhi sent me a handwritten kind of thank you note, in which he had one line which I think captures it. It said, "Thank you for giving us back our self-respect," which really is what you're doing when you're turning around companies, because everyone there is depressed. You've got to make them believe in themselves, and then they'll make the company happen. And that's been my experience. been my experience with those companies, been my experience with Magic. Not that we had to turn around Magic per se, but to grow it from 5-6 million when we took it to this 40 odd million today, and people believing that they can go to 100 in the next 2-3 years or 4 years.
Really?
Yeah. It just, they have to believe. I can't, Aki, none of us can make it happen. The people make it happen. And unfortunately, the press reports it as one person, that's how it's simple for them to report it that way. But ultimately, it's the people in there who are, lots of them, who make it happen. And so technically, you have to make sure that they feel good. You give them a good environment to work in. They go the extra mile because they like what they're doing. I think that's what makes it happen.
Right. So while it was sort of exciting for you to revive, those, those particular parts which were not profitable, it was, of course, a learning experience for people who were working, and of course, as you said, it gave them the lost confidence, and that's a great thing.